Okay, well, thank you all very much for your attendance today. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be presenting on the ESG reporting for renewable energy, hydrogen and batteries. My name is Michael Salvatico, as I was so kindly introduced in Korean, and I head up the Asia Pacific ESG Sustainable One department for S&P Global. Right at the beginning, let's frame the focus on ESG because there is a large momentum behind the focus on the ESG profile of companies, wherever those companies are. And the focus is on ESG across the organization, but also on specific areas of the company's operations, such as climate risk. And if we look today at the companies around the world and their focus on these areas and reporting on these areas, we can see that 70%, 77% of major companies have publicly disclosed carbon targets, and that there is a significant amount of capital in those funds, with 1 trillion assets under management funds that abide by ESG principles, and $56.4 billion invested in sustainable funds. It's an increase of 50% over the period since COVID started. We also see a growth in the debt focused on sustainability, both the climate-linked and sustainability-linked loans. The expectation for 2021 is that that grows to 700 billion, and our analysis in the credit ratings team expect that this will grow to $1 trillion. I want to quickly introduce S&P Global to you from a sustainability perspective. In case you aren't aware, S&P Global has a large index presence and is well recognized for the ESG indices that we provide. You can see here some examples across ESG investing, as well as in Asia Asset Management and the Environmental Finance Sustainability Investment Awards. We do walk the talk. We're members of PRI and CDP. We have prepared our own Tcfd reports. So when I talk to you about reporting from any perspective, it's in reference to what we do as well as what we help our clients do. At S&P Global, we are a group of services and have solutions across our divisions. Today, we're very focused on the work that Platts does around the renewable energy, the batteries area, but also S&P Global has work and analysis and expertise in ratings companies on the credit rating side, in the indices as we saw, and from a data and analytics perspective, which is what I'm representing today from the market intelligence team, where we work with corporates and with financial institutions. To really understand the ESG reporting of a group of companies, such as renewable energy and batteries companies, it's important to understand what's driving the focus on ESG. And if we look in general at companies and the pressures that they face from multiple stakeholders, in our conversations with these companies, we see they're concerned about losing business because throughout their supply chain or through to their product end use, their clients are increasingly focused on the impact that company has on the environment. And we see that in terms of the people that are employed in an organization as a form of human capital, that there's a greater scrutiny on the organization's management of its human capital, and that this is creating a competition for talent in the market, and that companies that are better at their social management have a greater opportunity to increase their productivity through retaining that talent. We see the same for impact as a focus of providing a positive contribution to ESG or climate in particular, and that's what we'll be focusing on in this presentation. Their impact, investment and opportunities through the investments made into renewable energy and batteries. Also, the access to diversified finance. We saw that with the $700 billion expected in green and social finance this year. Very focused on frameworks like the EU taxonomy, which help define and determine what is green. We see businesses increasing their focus on stakeholder communication and including ESG within their communications. And of course, the increasing focus on regulation means that no matter what area of the market you're servicing, there are some aspects of ESG that require you to report. In Korea, with a net zero target at the country level, there'll be an increasing focus on climate risk reporting, and exchanges are requiring greater focus on environmental and social reporting where it's deemed material. In general, from an ESG perspective, these are the aspects that companies focus on. So around the reporting of their sustainability initiatives and their sustainable operations. They're also very focused on transition to net zero, and that's part of the discussion for today as well, around how renewable energy contributes to the transition to net zero, and how batteries form a key part of that energy solution. The greater focus on supply chain management, so understanding throughout the supply chain the ESG risks that are owned or inherited through your operations. This is the same for companies that are operating in renewable energy and battery spaces. So for instance, looking through the supply chain to the mining of the resources, and understanding that if you're a battery producer, what the ESG dimensions are of the lithium mining company that you source your raw material from, and understanding that that company's ESG profile meets minimum standards, if not attracts global best practice. Investors are increasingly engaging companies, and it doesn't matter what company you are, it doesn't matter if you're a coal mining company or if you're a renewable energy company, you'll have investors focused on your ESG performance. That's something that I really wanted to bring out in my section of this presentation, is that it's not because a company provides a renewable energy solution or a battery solution and because they solve for net zero, that they are not being measured by the same metrics from an environmental and social and governance perspective, similar metrics that relate to their type of industry that other companies are being measured by as well. One of the areas that renewable energy and battery companies have greater opportunity to access is the sustainable financing because of the activities that those companies are involved in. If we look at a map of what types of reporting apply to the renewable energy and batteries companies, there is a broad range of what ESG represents. And I've tried here to summarize for you some of the aspects of that reporting. If we look on the left-hand side, you'll see the starting point is operational footprinting. And that really is the basics. That's understanding the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions of your organization. So say whether it's a renewable energy company or a battery company, your stakeholders are focused on your Scope 1 emissions, those are the emissions that are coming from your operations, or the emissions that you buy in through Scope 2, and also the upstream and downstream emissions. And they're going to be comparing that against companies in your industry because they are identifying how your organization is represented against global best practice. I mentioned supply chain management as an assessment that your stakeholders are also focused on in that industry. The net benefits and total benefits analysis are ways to identify the performance at a product level relative to a benchmark. So a way to promote the electricity produced by renewable energy is to compare it to alternative forms of energy, fossil fuel-based energies, for instance, to indicate the net benefit or GHG emissions savings from that activity. And that can also apply to water, to land use, to the pollution effects from that activity as well. And these can be taken, this reporting can be taken and used as the basis to promote financing instruments like green bonds. An SDG evaluation as a report is another way to indicate the positive contribution that the operations of a company is making that align with the 17 goals of the SDGs. Right down to the 169 targets. So for instance, companies in the renewable energy space are able to indicate their revenue alignment with the SDG goals around climate action, and that contributes positively in the promotion of the organization's profile. In the center on this slide, you'll see the TCFD aligned climate risk reporting. So TCFD is the framework that's being used to measure companies, increasingly being used to measure companies. It's a framework that applies a consistent approach through their governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics that are used to assess a company and its performance. TCFD aligned climate risk allows for companies to measure their transition risk and Paris alignment. Important metrics, again, for companies in renewable energy and batteries industries in measuring their impact and contribution or beneficial contribution towards a 1.5 degree alignment. Also measured in the TCFD climate risk aligned assessments is physical risk, and the physical risk will depend on where the operations are, where the assets are for the entity. Because regardless of what type of business you're operating in, if your assets are highly exposed to hazards such as sea level rise and storm intensity or heat wave, for instance, that is a risk to the ongoing operation of your organization or that asset. And so this is a concern regardless of what type of company we're analyzing. The EU taxonomy I mentioned quickly before as a way to measure the activities and their alignment to their green allocation, and green bonds is the tool that can be used to finance those instruments. On the right-hand side is the Csa and Esg scores. This is an assessment of the organization's ESG profile across the environmental, social, and governance criteria of the organization, and whether the company is in a renewable energy and batteries industry or any other industry, stakeholders are reviewing the company through all three of these aspects and measuring them against their global peers. An ESG evaluation is an assessment of that organization's ESG profile that differentiates itself through a series of management-focused interviews that assess the future strategies that management have for that organization. Here I highlight a focus on TCFD because of the connection between companies in the batteries and renewable energy space and climate change. There is a positive focus on the opportunity data set, which you see in the chart on the right-hand side, and how those activities provide for a benefit in terms of the alignment to Paris, or the 1.5 degree target, and the reduction in global carbon emissions. There are still risks involved, as I mentioned, certainly from the physical risks, which you also see on that chart. You'll see on the left-hand side of this slide the TCFD report that S&P Global has prepared. As I say, we walk the talk, we do the analysis ourselves. That's an interesting one for you to have a look at if you Google that report, to have some idea of the kinds of metrics that are being assessed, including an a climate earnings adjusted result that we publish. I mentioned the total value and benefits report. This slide provides some more detail on what that analysis provides to you as an entity, covering both the environmental, social, and financial aspects, the positive impacts on your organization, from not just from the operations, as I mentioned, but from supply chain and from downstream as well. So I say that it's a total value assessment across the entire organization, and companies which are providing renewable energy and battery solutions linked to renewable energy are likely to benefit from a total value assessment benchmark to the fossil fuel power alternatives.
Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Salvaticco, but due to limited time, we do only have 5 more minutes for your presentation. Please abide by the time. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's perfect. As we look at the SDG reporting, another aspect that has good alignment for companies in impact areas such as renewable energy and batteries, because the Sustainable Development Goals have a link back to the climate impacts that a company has through SDG 13, for instance. But at the same time, the organization is being measured against all SDGs, not just the positive SDGs, and against SDG risks as well. And those SDG risks include an assessment of aspects like forced labor and child labor. So no matter what industry you're in, these are measures that are being assessed and need to be addressed within your operations. Here's an example of an ESG evaluation for Repsol. You can see that the evaluation scores the E, S, and G profiles and provides a score out of 100. This is a score of 68 out of 100, where 100 is highest, and measures a number of the environmental, social, and governance criteria in order to arrive at that score. Measuring the second-party opinions on bonds in terms of their eligibility for the green financing. You can see that here's a framework-aligned overview that our ratings team provide, where we're assessing the use of proceeds, the management of proceeds, the process for project evaluation and reporting, in order to provide for a company's ability to access green finance. The CSA report is the report to think of when you're looking to understand your ESG profile, and it's an assessment, an online assessment that helps companies focus on where the ESG issues within their operations are being assessed or likely to be assessed by stakeholders. There's over 1,000 data points that are collected during this assessment, which are aggregated up to 100 question level scores, and then to 3 criteria ESG, and then the ESG score at the top. This is being analysed for 10,000 companies and provide a data set that's provided to banks and investment managers in order to assess companies, no matter what industry you're in. Last but not least, I've got an example here. I did provide a specific example of a CSA assessment, which is presented to you as an ESG score. I downloaded this from the S&P Global website. You can go and access this yourself from S&P Global by entering in any company that we're publishing, and it will provide you with the ESG score and the pillar scores. This company is in the renewable energy industry, and you can see that we're highlighting here the most meaningful criteria, and these criteria relate to talent attraction, to stakeholder engagement, operational eco-efficiency, occupational health, market opportunities, electricity generation, which relates more specifically to the industry. But the idea is to show you that even as a battery and a renewable energy company, all of these criteria around your operation are important ESG criteria to be reporting. I think I'm perfectly on time, so I'm going to stop there, and thank you all very much for your attention, and look forward to the opportunity to meet you or speak with you in the future. Please do reach out to S&P Global for more information.